Hi and welcome to our family narrative telephone. And the way this is going to work is that I'm going to tell a story and you need to watch the story once and then re-record it in one go. And you can make as many mistakes as you like. That's part of the fun. And then you finish your story and you pass it on to the next person. And then when they've all been told, we will watch them all together and see what wild and wonderful changes have been made and who made them as well, because that's all part of the fun. So, off we go. In the heart of the Peruvian jungle, there is a flower that blooms once every decade. When it blooms, the plant is said to have the most fantastic healing powers and can bring people back from the brink of death. Lady Eleanor Picklebottom heard of the flower in a desperate bid to save her brother. He was dying of a mysterious disease, and she was worried that if he'd passed, the family estate would go to her evil cousin Arnold. Lady Eleanor gathered her things, hired a crew, and headed across the sea to the deepest, darkest Peru. When there, she took possession of an aeroplane, hired a guide, and set off to where the flower was rumoured to be. She landed in a clearing near where the flowers were found. A short hike later, she was disheartened to find the flowers closed. They had not opened as she had been told. It could be a year or two before they were ready to be plucked and the healing extracted from the petals. It was too late to turn back as the sky had darkened above them. Lady Eleanor and her crew made camp by the flowers. The night was dark and full of terrors, but when they awoke the next dawn, something amazing had happened. The flowers had bloomed. She gathered some blooms to take home and headed back to her aeroplane. As they approached the plane, out of the woods a panther came prowling. Terrified, Lady Eleanor and her guide froze. The panther looked ready to pounce, but at the last minute it saw easier prey and chased after that. And so, Lady Eleanor was able to bottle the elixir made from the plant, save her brother's life, and prevent the evil Arnold from taking over. And that's the story. So think about what you can remember and have a go at retelling it.
Okay, now this is a story about a flower that grows deep in the heart of the Peruvian jungle. I think it flowers actually once every decade, and it's got the most amazing powers. It can bring people back from the brink of death. So one day, a lady called Eleanor Pinkerton, I think, wanted to go and get this flower because something was going to happen to her brother. And she didn't want her cousin Arnold to get it, so she decided she'd go to the Peruvian jungle and she hired an aeroplane and she flew there and she landed in a clearing where the flower blossomed, and she was very disappointed because when she got there the flower was closed and therefore it was no good. So she waited for a night, and during the night a panther scared the living daylights out of her. And after that, she woke up the next morning and the flower was actually blooming, so therefore she was able to bottle the elixir and take it to save her brother and to stop him getting into the grapples of her evil aunt. And I've no idea where the evil aunt came in the first place, but that seemed to be part of the story. So that's my version of it. Good luck.
So this is a story about a flower that is like an elixir of life in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. And it helps you if you are kind of on the brink of dying. And so this woman called Helena Pinkerton, her brother he's on the brink of death. And so Helena Pinkerton decides she's going to get the flower, which blossoms once every decade. She's going to go into the Peruvian jungle because her cousin Harold is she doesn't want him to go and get the flower. So she decides to go and get the flower. She gets a helicopter. She lands in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. She gets the flower for her brother, who is on the brink of death, and but she lands in the jungle, and the flower hasn't blossomed yet, and so she sleeps through the night She's very disappointed that the flower hasn't blossomed, because obviously she was taking the chance to go and get this flower. And in the middle of the night, a panther comes and scares her, frightens the living daylights out of her. The next morning, the flower has blossomed, and she says, "Hooray! I've got the flower for my brother to not be on the brink of death." Anyway, there's some part of the story about an evil aunt, and I'm guessing something to do with her. She wanted to get to the flower before Helen Pinkerton did, so that because she actually wants the brother to die. That's what I'm thinking the story is all about. Anyway, it's a good ending to the story, because she gets the flower, and Helena Pinkerton's brother lives happily ever after. Hurrah!
I'm going to start the video about the story. So it's a story about a young woman called Helena Pinkerton, whose brother is on the brink of death, and she is aware of a flower in the Peruvian jungle which has the elixir of life. So she wants to get hold of this flower so that she can give it to her brother and make sure that he lives. So she takes a helicopter and she goes to the jungle. And somewhere within the story there's a cousin called Harold, but I haven't a clue any more than that because that wasn't passed on. Anyway, she goes to the jungle in the helicopter and finds that the flower hasn't blossomed yet. So she decides to go to sleep. And she's very disappointed, obviously, that the flower hasn't blossomed. And somewhere in the story there's a panther. And I don't know anything more than that, other than she's scared of the panther, or the panther scares her. Anyway, she goes to sleep that night, and the next morning she discovers that the flower has blossomed, so she's very excited. And within the story there's also an evil aunt who seems to want to get to the flower herself to stop Helena reaching it and then giving it to her brother, because for some reason she seems to want this brother to die. Anyway, Helena does get to the flower and the brother doesn't die, so he lives, and so everybody, Helena and her brother live happily ever after with him, and having survived this trip because of the wonderful benefits of this this flower. Hope that's okay. Bye.
Okay, my version of the story. Here we go. There is a lady called Helena Pinkerton who has a brother who is not very well, and the only way to save him is with a special flower or plant, and this plant can only be found somewhere like a forest or something. And so she hops in a helicopter and goes to find it, but when she finds it, because it's got the elixir of life for her brother and will save him, it hasn't blossomed yet, so she gets really upset. Apparently there's a panther in there somewhere, and I think there was another creature, and she manages to get it and manages to save her brother. But there's also somewhere an evil aunt who doesn't want the brother to live and is trying to get the plant too. But the sister gets the plant and the brother lives. And they all live happily ever after.
So, here we go. There was once a lady named Helena Pinkerton whose brother was seriously ill and would die, and needed a special plant in order to make the elixir of life. And this plant allegedly grew in a particular forest. So Helena Pinkerton travelled to the forest by helicopter in order to get the plant to save the life of her brother. However, she had an evil aunt who, for some reason, was working against her, probably because she was evil, and wanted to take the plant for herself and prevent Helena Pinkerton from getting it. Also in the forest there was a panther and possibly another scary creature. Anyway, in spite of all of these obstacles, Helena Pinkerton succeeded in procuring said plant, or its flower, and from this plant the elixir could be brewed to save the life of her brother, who then lived a long and healthy life for many happy years.